Hey guys, it's Mathel here once again, and it is extremely quick to post another video, I'm aware of that, but that's because I've already been pretty fist deep into this character by the time I posted yesterday's, and this is the Voidforge Pathfinder using Bladestorm with the new Bladestorm Celestial effect, which I could not go past, of course, and it makes sense doing it with Voidforge, kind of a theme going on there, and I absolutely love Voidforge. If you've seen any of my content in the past, you'd be well aware of that. It is just another case of this sword being one of the most powerful attack-based items you can use for building an attack-based character and being extremely cheap. By the time I bought my 6-link Voidforge, I think it was about 2 exalts to get a 6-link Voidforge, and they're like 5C for the actual sword itself, but I did double corrupt mine and hit a bit of a physical roll, so it's got more DPS and then also a built-in onslaught. So it is a pretty beefy Voidforge, but they're still worthless. And if you are unaware of how a Voidforge works, essentially it starts out with a pretty mediocre amount of physical damage, but it gives you 300% extra of that physical into a random element every time you hit. So it gives you random fire, lightning, or cold at 300% of the base physical value, but the base physical is lost unless you convert it, and in this case I have converted 90% of that base physical, and then on top of that you still get a 300% to sometimes hit fire, lightning, or cold. So the idea is you stack some flat physical damage to make it have even more physical since it starts out without too much, and then scale elemental damage after that, and it seems to work out pretty well for any skill you want to use, since Voidforge is my once a league guaranteed win type of a character, and this one is absolutely no exception. As a matter of fact, it's probably the strongest character I've played this league. I will make the distinction that I enjoyed my Burning Arrow more, but this one is overall just a better performer, because throughout the video I will show you that it's taking on double beyonded, full sextanted, sometimes deliriumed, high tier maps pretty smoothly and rarely dying. It hit level 90 within 12 hours. It did level 90, or will do level 95 by the end of the 24-hour window for this character, and done all the endgame as well. It's the best wave 20 simulacrum I've ever done. It does most content deathless without any real issues, because we do have lots of damage, really good sustain through our life gain on hit using Feast of Flesh, and then we're a Pathfinder, which means our flasks almost never run out using a Lore Weave, so we're very resistant against elemental damage as well, and it's taken on 100% T16 Delirium, and I'll show you that in just a second as well, and that was pretty smooth, much smoother than the Burning Arrow build did, unfortunately, and it's got pretty solid DPS for what it is. So it's been the most successful character so far, and I've yet to really play it even past 18 hours so far, I think. So that's just the power of Voidforge. It's got a lot of extra damage and for some reason still highly underutilized. And if you'd really rather, you can absolutely turn this into a Cyclone character instead of Bladestorm, or you can go Sweep instead, which is pretty similar in playstyle to what you're seeing right now. The difference is Sweep has much bigger area and then also hits like twice as hard, but it won't have the lingering Bladestorm effect, so I think single target will be less impressive in the end, but it will, in plenty of cases, just like 1 or 2 shot things, and Sweep is pretty damn satisfying these days. But this sort of template, you can do most skills that are two-hand viable, and it's really up to you. Bladestorm, though, seems to be in a pretty good spot right now, and as you can see in these wave, I think 16, 17, something like that, coasters spawn, it's got pretty good single target. So spam your flasks, get a few Bladestorms out, and you can typically face tank, because with the Feast of Flesh that I've got 40 life gain on hit, and that means that every one of these Bladestorms ticking every single time is dumping an extra 40 HP into my life pool, on top of the life leech I've got, and on top of the pretty solid damage reduction. You'll notice that I don't have a huge amount of life, but that doesn't really matter because we do have a lot of defensive capability, and that's all it really takes. This is the T16 100% Delirium I was talking about. It wasn't anything too special mod-wise. I was just trying to get 100% T16 done for the achievement and to see how it fares. And in today's sort of stream, I'll probably take it on a bit harsher, but there's no real point doing 100% juiced up maps unless you have the most overpowered characters in existence, because it's just kind of a challenge and not a particularly rewarding one at that. So let's jump into how I've built the character so far. So here's our lovely character, level 93 Pathfinder called I Drink to Fill the Void. Drink, flasks, void, forge, void, soul, etc. You get where I'm going with that. So as always, I do have to introduce the Voidforge sword. Like I said, it's got a mediocre amount of fizz to begin with for a two-handed weapon, and then 300% of weapon fizz as extra damage of a random element, which means that every single time you hit, you get a huge triple multiplier onto your fizz as a sort of element. Your original damage is just completely lost because it says deal no non-elemental damage. So that 135 to 265 isn't originally converted, and if you deal no elemental damage, no non-elemental damage, that means that physical is completely lost. It also means you can't use chaos damage. So to regain that physical, we try and convert the physical into an element, and in this case it is cold and lightning on our gloves, and also 40% of cold over here. So that's 90% converted. We're losing 10% of our original physical, but it's not a real big deal because we deal 390% of weapon fizz as elemental, so we're losing 10% out of a potential 400% there. And that's also why you don't really stack too many percent extra modifiers in an item like this or a build like this. So if you want usual, a fizz build would go percent extra elemental amulet, for example, so percent extra cold up to like 18%. It's not really worth using because you've already got 400% coming in from here. So that's why instead we try and scale everything around the base of the weapon. So we've got Hatred that scales a bunch of our cold damage and gives us a little bit of extra cold damage, but ultimately it's not the strongest aura out there, given that it's only scaling one of our three elements and a bit of the base as well. But we use it because we want to use a Hatred crit duel over here, since we do have a fairly low amount of base crit, only 5 on the weapon. And like I said, I did double corrupt this one to get Onslaught and a little bit of extra fizz as well. The best possible corrupt is easily Fortify, because that's an actual powerful 7th link, whereas this one just kind of a quality of life and a bit of extra damage. I've decided to use Loreweave in this build, as most Voidforge builds would, because it's got a bit of everything for Voidforge, but I really want to ignore minus max in endgame maps, and also stack elemental reduction with Pathfinder. With the 78 max res, Pathfinder having 6% reduced LE damage taken, a triple balanced Wise Oak gives another 10% reduced, even more if you're a Pathfinder, like 12% reduced. And then if you have the upgraded Pantheon here for 8 reduced elemental damage, on the first hit you take basically nothing from most elements, but you are otherwise very sustainable anyway as a Pathfinder with all of your other shenanigans. We do have 2 clusters in this build. Our original large clusters are nothing too special, but the best we can do is going Sure-Footed Striker, which is 40% crit chance with 2-hand, and then 8% chance to deal double damage. Then a bit of accuracy and attack speed crit, and likewise Fuel the Fight, which is just a bit of mana leech. But Brutal Infamy we got for 60% increased damage, since this is just what happened with my rolls. I would have rather gone the 8% double damage, but this is where it landed after rolling a few times. So on the 2-hand passive ones, and then of course the customary Warcry nodes that give crit, crit multi, rage, intimidate, crit multi, rage, and crit multi. And then like I mentioned, I'm stacking Feasts of Flesh, so a little bit of leech, but mostly the life gain on hit is what we're looking for. And then we're filling out a lot of resists and a bit of stats through these as well. So the idea is that Bladestorm with the Helm enchant plus one number of Bladestorms means you can have 4 Bladestorms up at a time. And currently you can't really see that with multi-strike, but they're all ticking individually, and then you are getting all that life gain on hit to do lots of good work for you. And supposedly with multi-strike, the ticks are enhanced, and that's why we're using multi-strike, likewise with Ruthless. So we do get lots of life gain on hit through those, and you can see that you just swap between sand and blood to get single target versus area going. But the playstyle, even with multi-strike, is essentially throwing out one or so Bladestorms and then moving on, and only on boss fights and really thick enemies do you attack multiple times. So Ruthless, multi-strike, pulverize, inspiration, Bladestorm, and close combat. Don't use pulverize until you have a really decent amount of attack speed, because it will feel pretty bad otherwise. And then the rest, there's not really much else to say. Pretty customary. Assassin Mark ring with Mark of the Elder. I'm not sure this is the absolutely necessary combo. You can go a buffed Herod of Purity ring, or just a steel ring with lots of good accuracy and damage and all that. But it's pretty stock standard, easy one to get going. And then the usual Tailwind boots, some reduced flask charge belt, so that you can stack Pathfinder potions even more and get a lot of uses out of your potions. Crit, multi, fizz, life, lots of int amulet, and these gloves. So to make these gloves, you need eye level 71 to 74 temple conversion gloves, and then slam a Crusader orb onto them, and it will guarantee one of the other types of conversion because it can't hit anything else. That's why we do these, and that's the only way to get good 50% converted gloves, because you can't craft on top of a temple mod, and you can't craft the conversion on top of a Crusader mod. That's how you do that, and it's kind of worth it in this build, but that's just what we've gone with. And I have gone somewhat all out on the character's gear, so if you have a much leaner budget, it's not going to perform quite as much, but we are doing pretty well for what I've put in right now anyway. And beside that, there's not much else to mention. As a Pathfinder, currently I've spec'd into these just because I'm a bit low on resist, but I shouldn't need to do that most of the time, because let me get rid of this. I was running endurance charge for a 4th endurance charge, since they're going to be up all the time with auto warcry. The way this is currently working is I have undercapped resists, but my Wyzerk is basically always up, and so are endurance charges. So I am capped on resists. However, just for the Cirrus fight, I ended up speccing into a bit of resist here, primarily because sometimes you won't have your endurance charges up at the start of a phase. So I did have to go ahead and do that. Or I thought I wanted to do that just to be a bit tankier. The only other thing to mention, I think it's just another sort of Voidforge build. The only other thing to kind of mention is our 6-link in here isn't really used as a 6-link, it's just currently a 5-link, got precision, and then all the good Ancestral Warchief crap, who does do a lot of extra damage for you. You've got Stone Golem, Berserk, Enduring Cry, Blood Rage, Blood Magic, Fortify, Leap, Slam, faster attacks, and then Enlighten 4, Hatred, Blood and Sand, and Herald of Purity. Ideally, we do get a minus mana cost craft to really make mana a lot easier, but currently with Inspiration and some Mana Leech, this is fine as well. I'm not sure what else to really talk about. A lot of people ask why Pathfinder, because it's not a very obvious ascendancy for this sort of stuff, and true enough, you can make a Voidforge or a melee or attack-based build. It's just about any ascendancy. Berserk is the one that's going to have the most damage if you're interested. But Pathfinder, once a build has enough damage, and Voidforge builds typically have enough damage by themselves, just by nature of the weapon and the stacking, then Pathfinder becomes extremely good for utility, convenience, quality of life. So your flasks basically never run out thanks to this stuff. You're immune to ailments. You have a lot more flasks throughout mapping, and then you've also got a bit of damage here, and then attack speed and movement speed. So overall, Pathfinder feels amazing if you've never played one before, as long as you're doing it on a build that can afford to not get that much damage from their ascendancy. Other than that though, yeah, can always recommend a Voidforge character. Like I said, don't have to play Bladestorm, can do just about anything. Just plain Cyclone if you'd rather. Definitely still works as well. For now though, gonna leave it there. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the character and the little wrap up, and see you next time.